I'm approached daily by private equity funds with troubled investments, and it all starts with cash. They never got control of cash. The CEO is flying blind. His ability to make good decisions is going to be vastly improved by real-time data.
The investment bankers will tell you straight up that nothing will enhance the value of your company more than 5 years of very clean financials.
It doesn't make sense that a CEO would not want the CFO to be a part of strategy discussions.
So, hey, welcome back to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. I'm really happy to have my good friend Bob Gold with me. I've known Bob for several years. He's an unbelievable CFO, posts some great content out there on LinkedIn that everybody should be reading. What I love about his background is he's one of the few people that's got a great grasp of the differences between public companies, private companies, and most importantly, public or private equity companies, and a great grasp of what I think is the most difficult job in industry right now, CFO. So, Bob, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Craig. It's great to be here.
So what's happening? You're up in Connecticut today.
I'm in Connecticut today. I just finished an assignment with Picken, working on my next, looking for my next role. Focused a lot right now on what makes a great private equity CFO, as you said.
So what does make a great, let's talk about what does make a great private equity CFO. You know, the world is all going private equity right now. I mean, it's, you know, the prevalence of private equity just continues to grow. A lot of challenges in there.
Yeah, I think that that any CFO going into a private equity role, the first thing they have to do is they have to have an absolute obsession with tracking cash. Where's it coming from? Where's it going? I'm approached daily by private equity funds with troubled investments, and it all starts with cash. They never got control of cash.
I've heard that. It's the first thing, as I've placed several CFOs this year, it's the first thing everybody talks to me about. Cash management is a big issue. Why does it get to that? Why does it get to that point? You know, when you think about, these businesses that they're buying, you think they've done their due diligence. They would understand the balance sheet and cash flow statements.
Due diligence is done well. And I think they do understand the financial statements, but I think the deeper level of diligence is what are the drivers of cash? In other words, too many times I see CFOs who are surprised by a large cash outflow they should have had visibility to. Or there's internal communication within the organization where a divisional president is making a decision and doesn't realize the impact it's going to have on the cash. Many of these companies are operating at incredibly high levels of leverage. Private equity funds use leverage as a tool. There's nothing wrong with that. But visibility into how cash is spent is incredibly important. The CFO can't just be a historian tracking what happened. They need to be interacting with management every single day, talking about the decisions that are going to be made and their impact on the business. And they need to be educating management on how the decisions they make are impacting cash. I worked in a company where we had a division president offer a large customer, 120-day terms. Well, 120-day terms slows cash flow into the business.
180-day terms means you're ordering. Oh, I'm sorry?
120.
120, yeah, but 120-day terms means, for a company, you're talking about, you're going to your suppliers and you've got 60-day lead times. You're paying for stuff with 60-day lead times. Yeah, you're manufacturing what you're manufacturing. You're delivering it to your customer. And then you got 120 days. You got 180 days sitting on. Yeah.
Cash to cash cycle is critical. It is critical. Cash to cash cycle is the day that I take the order, start placing orders for materials till I collect. Typically, I'm paying suppliers faster than I'm collecting. in today's world.
Yeah, that's a problem. You know, the interesting thing is I've done 3 CFO searches in the last 120, 180 days. And each time the CFO or the CEO or the president has come and said, I feel like I'm flying blind. I can't run the business because I can't see the numbers, which tells me it's a little bit of a different skill set that, you know, most people are looking for FP&A. Most people are looking for good forecasting, forward thinking. Is that what a CEO should be looking at right now? How should a CEO be thinking about partnering with his CFO?
You know, the CFO needs to be more than just a mechanic who's, you know, creating numbers. They need to be a strategic value partner to the CEO. But more important, I think, is that a 15-day close just can't be acceptable. You have to start there, right? If I'm taking 15 days to close the books and then another couple of days to put together operational reporting, I'm 20 days in to the next month before I can start understanding what happened in the previous month. It's incredible the amount of resistance I get when I drop into a company and say, I want to accelerate the close. What I hear is we can't, we're doing the best we can. But typically it's from people who haven't seen anything else. And once you start bringing in technology solutions, you can speed the close and put information not just in the hands of the CEO, but in the hands of the rest of the leadership team to help them with decision making. I hear that comment all the time. We're flying blind. I don't have current information. At a number of companies, I try to put in weekly and mid-month checkpoints. Where are we relative to what we're trying to accomplish? I'll never forget, Craig, a long time ago in my career when I was with Danaher, Tom Joyce, who at the time was a divisional president, and I worked for him. He went on to be the CEO of Danaher. Tom Joyce and I were sitting in an office on a Saturday morning, and we were doing some ops reviews with a couple of the plant managers. We're 3 weeks into the month, plant manager is disclosing to us that he's going to miss the month. And the words Tom said, which have resonated with me for my entire career, is, you've robbed us of any opportunity to fix the situation because he took too long to tell us he was going to miss the month. He knew he was going to miss the month at least a week or more earlier.
What would you have done different? You think about, I remember, when I was at Bombardier, Larry Carter from Cisco. Larry Carter is the CFO of Cisco. And the big thing was, hey, look, I can figure out, big publicly traded company, I can figure out how to close the books in 24 hours. That was the big thing back then. In today's day and age, why is it taking companies 15, 20 days to close the books?
It's interesting. I see it a lot. And this I do find fault with private equity for the most part, because private equity is always reluctant to make that technology investment. If you think about a 3 to 5 year horizon, how do you measure the value of shortening the close time to provide the information faster? How do you measure the value of getting real-time information into the hands of decision makers? So these technology investments are typically not small investments. They're not ERP level investments, but they are, somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million at a reasonably sized company. And how do you convince a PE fund that has a 5-year horizon that you're going to create value by streamlining operations? You are going to create value by taking, maybe by taking a couple of heads out, because you'll be reducing work and technology will be replacing that work. But the real value will be created by providing the real-time information. So you asked, what would I do if I had known about missing the month a week or two earlier? Well, is it a throughput problem? Could I put a SWAT team on that problem and solve it over a weekend so that we could improve throughput? Is it a cost issue? Are there things we can do right away to improve, to adjust costs? These are, using Tom Joyce's words, which I thought were, like I said, he said this more than 20 years ago, and it still resonates with me, is you robbed us of any opportunity. So maybe we couldn't have done anything. But by telling us in the third week of the month, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah. Well, so what is the level? All right. So you talk about like putting in, how do you describe to a private equity group that the value of closing the books quicker, the value of putting in the ERPs? You know, they look at cash. They go, hey, if I got to spend $1 million on this, I'm going to put a multiple to it. It's 10 multiple. It's really a $10 million hit to EBITDA or whatever you want to call it. So, probably not the best way to think about it, but that's the way they are looking about it, where cash is king. Is there a way you can measure the value of that investment?
Look, there certainly are ways to measure the value of that investment by extending it to the decisions that are made with better information. It starts with getting the CEO and partnering with the CEO who says he's flying blind. It starts there. Because if the CEO is flying blind, his ability to make good decisions is going to be vastly improved by real-time data. It's funny the way you phrase the question, because I worked for a company, and I wanted to make the investment. And it was a really cheap investment. It was $150,000. We were closing the books and consolidating the books in Excel. And the Excel model was fraught with errors. We were spending weeks and weeks and weeks every month just correcting errors. And I said, I'm going to spend $150,000 and I'm going to fix this problem by putting in a consolidation system, not even replacing an ERP, just putting a consolidation system above the existing ERPs. And the response I got from a young analyst or associate was exactly what you said. At a 7 times multiple, that's going to cost us, $900,000 off of a sale. And I said, how much is an error in the books or in the consolidation going to cost when we go to exit? And the more mature people at that private equity fund got it right away because they could see the impact of the errors. They thought bigger.
The investment bankers will tell you straight up that nothing will enhance the value of your company more than 5 years of very clean financials.
Exactly. And it's interesting because if you listen to a number of companies, public companies, where they have to sit back and they have to disclose that we're making a prior period adjustment, we're cleaning up some old accounting. I've been involved in that through my career. There is nothing that hurts the stock value more than cleaning up old accounting.
Yeah, I mean, you turn on CNBC and somebody's restating earnings and you see 20, 30% drop in the stock price, like instant, or more.
And I believe that companies are not taking, I read a lot about the implementation. We have to implement AI. Well, the solution is not implement AI. The solution is solve a problem. What are the pain points? AI may be a part of that solution, right? But is there a pain point? You have to think process. You have to think record to report. You have to think procure to pay. And how, where are the pain points? What are the problems we need to solve? That's how this gets done. And AI will be, as we move forward, AI will be a part of those solutions, but you can't implement AI for the fun of implementing AI.
Well, you still have to invest in it too. I mean, that comes back to the original thing. If you're not willing to invest in it because it's going to hit, put a hit on your EBITDA, there's
Right.
that, you're back into the barrel.
I want you to think, I've been doing what I do for a long time. And the number of companies that I've walked into where I see someone in their close process, and oh, look, it's been a long time since I've been a mechanic in the month close process. But what I see is I'm downloading information out of this system into an Excel spreadsheet so that I can manipulate it and upload it into another system to close the books. That level of inefficiency is unconscionable.
What let's shift gears a little bit. You've got a lot of bigger company public experience, and then you made the transition into private equity. If I'm a if I'm a finance professional, I've been working at, say, Raytheon, or pick a company, Boeing, Raytheon, and I'm like, I want to go take a swing at this private equity bat. What are three things I need to be expecting? And what's the playbook to make that transition?
Oh, that's a great question. I was a little bit naive. I made a very intentional decision coming out of Danaher to go into private equity. And I will tell you that it was young in my career and I was a little bit naive because the one thing coming out of a Danaher as a divisional CFO, and I had one stint as a general manager, but what you don't have is you don't have any treasury, cash management, or banking experience. And you have to be ready for that. It's where you and I started this conversation. You have to be ready for the cash management and the banking. You have to manage your banking relationships on a daily and weekly basis. You have to bring them along with you because there's going to be a day when you're in trouble and you need them and you want them to be your partner. So I would tell you that's the first thing. I tell you the second thing is you need to be able to walk into a new business, identify the business levers, and create the KPIs. So many businesses I walk into don't have a cogent set of KPIs. I just came out of one company, they had KPIs, but they had so many that you couldn't differentiate what was important versus what wasn't. The value of KPIs is the ability to use them to manage the business. So if I have 300 of them, that's not going to help me manage the business. I'm a big believer that what are the 10, 15, or 20 things that I need to be looking at all the time that are going to drive the business. Because if I need to be looking at 300 things, I'm never going to be able to manage that. And then I would say finally, is the ability to communicate with exceptional clarity. People, you need to be able to not only communicate, but educate, especially when you're in the lower middle market. In the lower middle market, you have people who are really good at their jobs. Most of the time, you really do. You have people who are exceptional at what they do on the leadership team, but they don't always know the impact of their decisions on the financial statements, on the cash position. So communication with clarity and being able to educate your peers in a way that is constructive is just critical.
Interesting. So going back to the KPIs thing, let's talk about the Pareto principle. Pareto principle here. You got probably 5 KPIs in any business that mean much more than anything else the cat could drag in. So, what are the 5 KPIs that you advise any CEO or private equity group to actually manage the business to?
If I was going to limit it to 5, I'd probably be stuck with balance sheet stuff, like DSO, DPO, but I wouldn't limit it to 5. I tend to think of about 20 KPIs, and it's going to be very business specific. For instance, I was recently talking to a company that provides HVAC services, residential and commercial HVAC services. The major KPIs of that business are all around the utilization of their technicians. How many times does a technician have to go back and fix something, a second call on the same problem? How many hours a week is a technician actually billing? How much time are we losing because a technician shows up at a location, doesn't have the parts he needs? So do we have the right parts on the truck? It's all of that. But KPIs that are meaningful are very specific to the business. If I go back and I look at AM General was we produced the military Humvee, probably the coolest product in the world and one of my best jobs ever. And the thing about, our major KPI was completed vehicles off the line. Why was that our major KPI? Because completed vehicles what determined what pricing band we would be in when we sold to the government. So if I'm producing 15 a day versus 7 a day, for example. But beyond that, it was labor. One of the interesting things we discovered when I was at AM General was the ratio of direct labor and indirect labor. We were really overweighted on indirect labor, and fixing that, becoming more efficient in how we fed the line and how we fed the line, how we covered for absenteeism, all of that plays through. So the KPI is exactly what it's defined as. It's a key performance indicator. It's an indication of where you need to look under the hood.
Our businesses, have you found that in the private equity world? I mean, I got to think companies like General Motors, Ford, your more established companies are pretty good. Danaher definitely are better looking at their defined KPIs. Do most private equity groups, middle market private equity groups, when they're buying smaller EBITDA companies, do they understand what KPIs they need to be looking at when they're buying that company?
Think they have. So it's interesting that you compared it to Danaher, because Danaher had a process which was the 100 days before the acquisition closed. And it was during that period of time, the agreement's been signed, we're 100 days out or 80 days out to close. We're going to start defining what is our action plan? What are the things we need to get to right away? And in that 80 days, we're going to define what we think are the right KPIs. But you really don't know until you get in what the right KPIs are. The importance of this is if you do it right, they're leading indicators. It does you no good if you're tracking a KPI and you're already out of cash, right? What's the leading indicator? I was talking to somebody the other day about what is the leading indicator of gun safe sales. What's the leading indicator of sales of gun safes? And I was shocked, but the leading indicator of gun safe sales is home sales, because people don't move their safe. They move their guns. So when home sales go down, gun safe sales go down. That was an interesting revelation to me. That's the leading indicator. And that's a great example of a perfect KPI, figuring it out and understanding it. So I don't think companies know on day one what the KPIs are they should be tracking. And I think too often in private equity, and especially in lower middle market, and I haven't been in lower middle market for a while, but I think that in lower middle market, I think that a lot of the KPIs are rearview mirror. And they need to spend more time trying to figure out what's the leading indicator. One of the things is very simple. It's the sales funnel. What does the sales funnel look like? And at what rate are we dropping through? And why are we not winning? Right? So what's our ratio of wins to opportunities? That's a great leading indicator, because it requires us to peel back the onion and understand why we're not winning.
Interesting. I love it. What, but I think being the CFO of a private equity company, I think being a CFO in general, candidly, probably the hardest job out there. I think two things, I think it's more important. A good CFO is probably more important than a CEO. Good CEO. You can get by with a decent CEO, but you need a good CFO. Um, why has being a CFO become the hardest job in the world? I mean, is it?
Well, I think there's a couple of things to unpack there. First, I would tell you that I've had the privilege of working with some great CEOs. And a great CEO knows that he's got an important partner in a CFO. He doesn't need to be an accountant. He doesn't need to be a FP&A guy. He needs to be a strategy guy. But what makes this job so hard is the number of stakeholders. On any given day, I'm on the phone with a couple of guys from the private equity fund, lenders, and the CEO, and the leadership team. And all of these people are stakeholders. They're important stakeholders. So I think that makes it hard. The other thing is that the CEO is the CFO is expected to know everything. My daughter once asked me about my job, and I told her, I said, my job is like taking an oral exam every day because you have to have the answers. You have to have gone deep enough to have the answers, but not so deep that you're doing someone else's job.
How do you do that? I mean, that's how do you get that's how do you get there? You're talking about.
So what I would tell you is that you get there by making sure you have the right team underneath you. I will tell you, I was only at Pitney Bowes for a short period of time. I had an outstanding team, one of the best teams I've ever had. At AM General, I had one of the best teams I've ever had working for me. And when you have confidence in the people who work with you every day, that you rely on every day, you can figure out how deep you need to go, and you don't need to dive into the accounting. At other companies where we've had issues with the accounting, I've had to go deeper than I wanted to. Excuse me, I worked for an aerospace and defense company. I'll never forget this. I was sitting in a board meeting in Massachusetts, and I got a call from the controller. She said, Bob, I think we have a major problem with when we're going to have a prior period adjustment. I said, oh my gosh. I had to get on a plane, fly back to the headquarters, and started digging in myself, literally reconciling accounts. And when you peel back the onion, I found that the system was operating properly, and this accountant was making journal entries to reverse what the system was doing. So I didn't have a team there that I could rely on. So I had to go very deep. I don't like that.
I can imagine not. What?
But it's all about your team. I would tell you that a CFO walking into a private equity investment, whether you're there on day one when the acquisition occurs, or you're hired in post-acquisition, I said, job one is cash. Job two, first 90 days, assess your team. And if you need to make changes, don't wait. There's a tendency to say, well, they have knowledge that I'll lose if I let them go. There's a tendency, so knowledge is not intellect. And knowledge is the knowledge. It's a bad thing when the knowledge resides with an individual versus the institution. But at the same time, you can't be a prisoner to that knowledge if you have an underperformer.
No doubt.
Performers will figure it out.
Well, that's something. It's funny. My workout partner is a private equity guy, and he's working in a company, and everybody wants to hold on to their little piece of the pie. They want their own little bit of knowledge, and it's their power is in what they feel like what they know. how do you bring that out? What's the best strategy to bring that out of them to make sure that, hey, knowledge is disseminated throughout the finance organization and up to the CEO, the people that matter?
So I try to tell the leaders who work for me that they need to make sure that they let their people shine. I don't have to be the smartest guy in the room, and I certainly don't have to be presenting other people's work. I worked for a guy when I was working at a portfolio company of Aurora Capital Group. There was a guy on our board. He worked for Aurora. His name was Mark Hardy. Mark was just one of the nicest and smartest guys I've ever worked with. And one of the things that he said is leadership and management are jobs too. So if you're providing the right leadership, the vision, and managing, a big part of what you're doing is developing the people underneath you, giving them the opportunity to present, giving them the opportunity to share their knowledge, and they in turn need to be giving the people who work for them the opportunity. I had a guy working for me at Pitney Bowes, one of the smartest guys I've ever worked with, and he's going to be a CFO one day. I'm convinced of it, and I'm going to help him get there. And one of the things that I used to coach him on all the time is that you do too much talking in every meeting. Let other people talk, present. That's a big part of bringing people along, disseminating knowledge. When people don't feel threatened by the little bit of knowledge that is theirs, they'll share it.
Interesting. I love it. That's leadership 101. I mean, it's let help her shine. A couple years ago, I placed the CFO of a satellite communications company. And the CEO is like, I've got a good finance team that could tell me how much it costs to build every widget, but I don't know what the future. I want to predict the future. Talk about the strategic part of the CFO role. We want a strategic CFO. Talk about what that in your mind looks like.
So what that means to me, I break it into two pieces. First is, what is the top line? What is the future of the top line? What is our strategy around the top line? And I think that if we leave it to just divisional management rather than cross-functional management, we lose creativity. So as a CFO, I want to be a part of that discussion. I want to sit in the room and I want to question the growth, not only the growth projections, but the growth strategy. Are we addressing the right customer bases? Are we addressing the needs of the customers? Have the customers asked for the things that we're going to do in the future? Because otherwise, we're wasting money. It all starts with the voice of the customer. And I want to be a part of that discussion, and I add value to that discussion. We had a discussion about the top line a long time ago at Danaher when I was with the toolbox business. We were talking about truck boxes on the back of pickup trucks. And we were talking about how the trend at the time seemed like it was going to be boxes that were painted the same color as the truck. And we were trying to figure out how could we do that. We basically painted boxes white or black. And most of them were white or they were just aluminum. And I pitched the idea. We didn't go with it, but it was an important pitch, which was, let's sell a raw steel box with a strategic partnership with someone who does automotive body work or painting. It's just a way to bring creativity into the discussion. Then once you align on a top line strategy, what are the resources we need underneath it? How are we going to do that? What are our underlying assumptions around material cost, around labor, around how are we going to restructure our overhead? It's all a very important part of a cross-functional discussion. And that's how a really good strategy is built. I worked for a CEO once, and he was brand new in the job, and we were going over how I spent my time. And I said, well, I have a pretty regular cadence with each of the division presidents so we can review strategy, review spend. And he said, why would they do that? You shouldn't be doing that. And I was shocked. He said, that's their job, not yours. And I ended up not staying at that company. It wasn't a fit. It doesn't make sense that a CEO would not want the CFO to be a part of strategy discussions.
I would think not.
CFO needs to be able to, as I said, frame up what the financial picture of the organization needs to look like to support the top line. And if the top line's contracting, the CFO needs to be able to frame up the actions that need to be taken to protect the bottom line.
Yeah, I always looked at the CEO CFO partnership in 17 years of doing this. I always looked at the CEO. I'll go back to my naval aviation background. It's a little bit like an F-14. The guy in the front seat is flying the jet. The guy in the back seat is fighting the jet. It's kind of, a little bit, you're both in the cockpit, a little bit different roles, but you're working together to take it to a new level. Is that an accurate? I mean, is that good? It's a partnership, and a good CFO or a good CEO looks to their CFO as a partner to get the business to where it needs to be.
I think it's incredibly accurate. And one of the best CEOs I ever worked with was at AM General, a guy named Andy Hove. Andy was incredibly strategic. He understood our business, which was tactical wheeled vehicles. He understood our business better than anyone. And he told me on day one, he said, you have your job to do. If I need to tell you how to do it, I don't need you. I thought that was great because he was giving me the freedom to do the job I wanted to do. And we created an incredible partnership because, by way of example, I made myself available to the teams whenever there was a large capital expenditure. I wanted to meet with them before they presented to Andy so that I could ask them all the hard questions in advance. Andy and I used to play off of each other that way, so that I would ask them the questions in advance. They would know the questions that are coming up. And then when I asked them in a meeting, they weren't caught flat-footed. But at the same time, Andy then could pull the thread on that question and dive a little bit deeper. And it was an incredible partnership that we developed, and it worked exceptionally well. And look, a good CFO CEO partnership has really healthy friction. He and I were on the phone one day, and he wanted to sign an agreement, and I said to him, I said, Andy, this agreement has no way to unwind it if the partnership doesn't work out. And he went off on me, and he said, you're already talking about a failure before we even get started. And we just, and then 3 days later, we got together and we reconfigured the agreement. So there's always a healthy friction. You have to be willing to be able to push back. Partnerships that don't work are when you're a yes man.
I love it. 2 or 3 things a young CFO or a mid-career CFO wants to think about before they go into private equity. Be very careful about what you wish for quite often, right?
So what I would tell you is don't do this for the money. Don't do this chasing the dollar. There are more, you read about the home runs in the paper, but there are more singles and doubles in private equity than there are home runs.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going into private equity for the money, don't do it because you're going to work your ass off. Typically you're going to work 6 days a week at a minimum. So don't do it for the money. Do it because you really like the work. You really like the operating cadence, and you like the rigor. one of the things that I really love about private equity is I love working with incredibly smart people. And what's great is I work with a lot of really smart financial engineers,
Mhm.
but the best ones will know that they're not business operators and they'll know the difference. So be ready for that because you need to be the expert at what you do. The other thing I always think about in private equity, there's a saying that a PE fund is looking for an exit the day they close the acquisition.
Oh yeah.
It's not too far off the reality, but and because of that, as a CFO, when you walk in, you need to be operating on two clocks. The first clock is where is cash next week and for the next 13 weeks or the next 26 weeks? And the other one is, will we be ready to exit in 24 to 36 months? So that's my best advice to someone going into this.
Everybody, if you're going to private equity, you know the goal.
Yeah, you know the goal.
It's not a secret.
Right, right. And I will tell any incoming CFO, and based on my own experience, that in many cases, following a deal, the CFO is the first person to be exited.
Oh yeah.
The new fund wants their own guy in there. It's happened to me a few times.
Not a secret there. That's why I think being a CFO in private equity is probably the hardest job in the world.
But I love it. I mean, I will tell you, I love it. I would never go back to, maybe I'd go back to a very, very large divisional role at a GM or something like that. But I love working in private equity.
I love it. What's next for you?
I'm starting to look at operating partner positions with private equity where I can add value and mentor across a portfolio. I love mentoring people coming up in their career, and I love driving process improvement. I'm also looking at CFO roles in private equity, probably, $1 billion and up in revenue. Trying to figure it out.
There you go. Hey, Bob, thanks for coming on today. I enjoyed the conversation.
You too, Craig. Thanks for having me.
Loved it. Thank you for coming on.
You bet.